Hello, all you delightful beings out there, and welcome back to the stream. I am Razin, currently as Ether, the Labramon. And we are continuing our playthrough of Factorio this evening, where we are trying to get rid of a patch of iron ore.
Or what?
Well, it's kind of in the way of my expansion plans, so I gotta get rid of it.
Oh.
Yeah. The train's about to go with the rest of it. Excellent. Well, not the rest, but there's still plenty more iron ore in here. I don't know how fast we're going to be able to pull this off. Or if we're going to pull this off before I really desperately need this area. We'll find out. Yeah, Stardust, yeah. Begone is a mental health counselor.
Indeed.
He may cause some of the needs for mental health.
He comes from my area of puns and pain. It's like trick or treat, but you lose either way.
There you have it, folks.
I don't know how much longer I'll be up, but we'll keep going.
Alright. What was I producing? Or working on producing? I do not recall.
I don't know. I remember hearing sulfur a long time ago.
That was for explosives. Hello, Delimited. Alright, so each of these warehouses can hold 40 or 25k.
Okay.
This iron ore patch is 1.3 million.
Oh.
Maybe these warehouses aren't the answer I was hoping for. Let's set all these to be replaced whenever I get closer. Where's my car? There's my car. Alright. I didn't think I could. Would have been funny if I could put process fuel in there.
Huh.
Oh! My companion cannot be fueled with process fuel. Understood. I guess I have to use trees or coal for that. Begone.
What's up?
You're gonna make me sleepy.
Wake up. Psh.
Where's all my stuff going? Also, ow.
A bit delayed there.
Alright, so the first thing I need to do is produce quartz. Holy bejeebus, this is a big thing. And it requires sand and water for producing quartz.
Yep.
Not a whole lot there, Vinny. What do you mean, yep?
Well, it just makes scientific sense. What are you talking about? Yep. How else do you get quartz?
Usually from mining.
No, you do it by dividing a gallon into 4 parts.
Ugh.
Brain rot is killing Asher. The only counter to a god is puns. I mean, I suppose. Hey, yo, God, if I got a pun for you. What do you call a G-O-D? A dyslexic dog.
Wow.
You think you heard that?
Huh?
You think you heard that?
Probably.
I'm gonna go, I don't know, should I go make a sandwich or should I go make a burger? Burger hot, sandwich cold. Which one are you thinking?
Oh, crap. I would say sandwich.
Alright, sandwich it is.
Because I just had a sandwich.
Sandwich hot, burger cold. Obviously, you've had some really bad burgers then. I'll be right back.
Excellent! It does automatically take that route. But will it go back? That is a very good question. Probably one that I should have tested before. Oh. Okay, we'll just stay there for now, I suppose. Let's turn this around then. gonna disrupt quite a few things, but I think it'll be fine overall. Iron Alpha. Now it's to be able to make it. Yes. Let's watch how things work out for this and possibly make adjustments. I see. Okay. Okay. I see. I see. This is terrible. Let's move these here. Slowly. So I suppose I could just load it in. Oh, right. That doesn't quite work. The station can't go any further out, so I am working with things as is. I'm just scooting over the boxes. It's too late! Also, there was a curve right after this. That's part of why I'm moving everything. And the stations cannot be placed on a curve. This is a slightly tedious thing, but it's not actually that bad. So actually, I don't even need to move that one. Oops. There were several that I emptied that I did not need to. Oh wait, stop doing that. Your sandwich has been acquired?
Yeah. If you can guess exactly what kind of sandwich, I'll gift you a sub.
Ham and cheese.
Damn.
Wait, really?
Right, here you go. Yeah, really.
Oh, cool.
I was going to gift you a sub either way, but good job. Good guess.
Hello, Commander. In response to your request, we have sent backup. Good luck, Commander. We are forever in your debt.
Well, thank you much for the gift sub.
Yeah, you bet, man. Oh, your CC there was not looking too good. It was like, you are a victim of the America, and there's the death of, like, the Rush, like the Rethan something.
What?
Russia's the room. UCC, there are no dividends. Would you are a victim of the American? There are the death of White Bean. What is most fuels the room? I'm gonna be honest, man. Your CC kind of is bad.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Your CC, your closed caption.
Oh. What other options are there to move the boxes?
Having something else move them?
I have a... I technically have closed captioning. It is automatically generated. It is not great.
Yeah.
But it exists. Technically.
I feel sad for all the people who have to read it. They're gonna be like, what? What are they? Death to America? What? Vive la France?
Use control click to move whole inventories. Make do. Well, sure, but what's the problem, Burnin? Wheelie Husky, thank you very much for that follow. Welcome.
Oh no. I'm just imagining a husky in like one of those doggy wheelchairs.
That's Dark Ragon.
No, it's happy because the husky gets to live out its life.
fine burning. Some people's kids, I swear, never happy.
Oh, tell me about it. That's what I had family therapy about earlier.
Aw, thank you, Wheelie. There! Ya happy now, burning? Really can never win.
I'm sorry.
It's game over for me, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have annoyed the burden for the last time.
Uh-huh. Guess we'll just have to shut down the channel.
Yep. Shut it all down. Never to exist again.
Never ever, man.
Never ever. Oh, if only Burden were happy.
Really twisting the screw there, ain't you, burning?
Alright.
Right.
Now to figure out this filtration plant. And how the heck I'm gonna pull this off. Do 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 do. I have a backed up ore belt because I'm not using all the ore. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Generally, things don't, you know.
Oh, haven't seen recently.
You what?
You know who I haven't seen recently?
Who?
Raijin. What do you get up to anyway?
He was literally here just a few minutes ago.
I don't believe you.
Well, I don't know what to tell you about that one there, Rygon.
I mean, if he was, and my memory is going, then I guess that's it, everybody. My family has a history of Alzheimer's, so then bye.
Wow.
You brought it up. You're the one trying to make me question my memory.
No.
I was a sleepy boy when Raijin was here. I don't believe you.
You're the one sitting here calling everybody liars for no goddamn reason.
I didn't say liar. I just simply said if you're making me question my stuff, then that's the response you get.
No, you dropped near. There we go. Oh, wait, no. Rhydon is adorable. And he is also an incredibly good friend.
I try.
Even if sometimes I want to rip my hair out.
I'm told Bald is in this year.
I have never cared about fashion, and I'm not about to start now.
I'll put the hot glue away then.
That sounds like a good idea. Alright, so we're producing quartz now. What the heck did I need quartz for? Alright, military tech cart.
To make gallons.
That is horrible.
Oh, well, pardon me, Mr. Perfect. I guess I forgot that you never ever make a mistake.
Get right to it. Now I only want you gone.
Now listen, I ain't gonna tell you twice. We don't know if there's gonna be a Portal 3 or not. Now I'm gonna have some of my friends here in the fan show you a thing or two what we do with test subjects just like you. Take it away!
Bum ba dum ba da da. Bum ba dum ba da ba dum. Ba dum ba da 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 dum bum ba da ba da da dum. I need to find somewhere to put Coke on my bar, on my bus. This thing of chaos and mayhem. I'll stop feeling so bad. That's what I'm counting on. Someone else's problem. Now I only want you gone. Now I only want you gone. Now I only want you gone.
So it's time for me to read story?
I mean, I'd be okay with this.
Yay. I go get horror story.
Why? I'm already looking in the mirror like you said earlier.
Oh no. Here we go. That would be a good horror story. Do we want a book or do we want a short story? And by book I mean just like a chapter.
I'd probably say short story.
Okay.
Something that we can actually have completed.
Okay. Okay, I'm looking some up. Oh no, this is a big one. Alright, this one is, this one looks good. It's like a whole chapter. It's called, Midnight Road by Ashley Shaluter. It has multiple chapters in it. I'm only going to read the first one.
But
Ready?
I wanted the whole story from start to finish.
Well, you want all 5 chapters?
Yeah.
We'll see how the first one goes.
Okay.
Alright. Chapter 1. August 1986. When Billy Hudson came screeching into the sheriff's department on the 9th of August 8th, his cherry red Firebird came within a hair's breadth of sideswiping the Price Cadillac belonging to Sheriff Andrew Lutz. When he heard the squealing of tires, Sheriff Lutz looked up from the outdated magazine he had been absent-mindedly thumbing through. He saw the fender of Billy's Pontiac come swinging towards the driver's side door of his caddy, and was out of his desk and halfway through the station in one swift, fluid motion. What the blazing hell was Billy thinking? Lutz thought with a look at his scuffed metal watch. It was barely minutes into Saturday morning, and Lutz's first inclination was that the young man had been drinking. What kind of a drunk driver willingly drives himself into police custody? Before the wheels of the Firebird had come to a full stop, the driver's side door swung open, and Billy Hudson tumbled out, falling to his knees before stumbling back to his feet. "They're dead!" Billy shouted breathlessly as he struggled for balance. "The McGuires! I think they're all dead!" Lutz's mouth had already opened to chastise Billy for nearly smashing in the door of his Cadillac. But at Billy's words, his jaw snapped shut with an audible click. Lutz took note of the scene before him. He had been sheriff of Richmond County for more than 10 years, having won re-election twice after Sheriff Bradley retired back in '75. In a county with 40,000 inhabitants spread over 400 square miles, he spent most of his time on the highways, and so was well acquainted with Billy Hudson and his group of gearheads. Billy was a polite kid, always respectful. That wasn't always the case with the young people of the town. Local teenage boys were entirely obsessed with their cars, and could often be found on one lone country road or another late at night, drinking and drag racing and having a generally wild time. They weren't bad kids, necessarily. There just wasn't much else to do in an area that was almost entirely given over to corn and soybean fields. At least once a month, Lutz or one of his deputies would have to go out and disperse the group once they got too rowdy, and began blasting the speakers on their stereos loud enough to wake the long-suffering farmers in the area. With a sinking heart, Lutz thought he knew what might have happened. "Which one of you hit him? Where's the accident?" He reached for the walkie-talkie at his hip, but Billy shook his head vehemently. "No one hit them, Sheriff. We weren't racing tonight. Stu Lennox is in deep shit with his daddy for wrecking his brand new Ford." "Get to the point, Billy," Lutz growled. "I'm sorry, sir." Billy began talking so quietly his words tripped over one another as they raced to get out, and he had to take a deep breath before continuing. "No one was racing tonight, Sheriff. I was out with Molly Green. She lives over in Oakville. We went to the drive-in and I took her home. On the way back I decided to take old Highway 99. I like how peaceful it is out there at night." Wanting to disturb the peace by revving up the Pontiac away from the troopers on the state highway is more like it, Sheriff Lutz thought, but didn't voice aloud. "Anyway, I was over by the McGuire place. You know, the big patch of woods out by that farm? I was driving out there and I saw something cross the road. Like a big shadow, bigger than a bear. It scared the shit out of me. I nearly lost control of the car." "Aren't any bears around here, son?" the sheriff replied skeptically. "Sure it wasn't a deer?" "It wasn't no damn deer, sir. It moved like a cat, but it was hunched and sloping like a bear. I only saw it for a second, but it definitely wasn't any deer I ever seen. It was taller than the roof of my car." What nonsense was this? Lutz ran a hand through his dark, thinning hair and looked down. It was then that he noticed the blood splattering Billy's dusty work boots and the hem of his jeans. Backing slowly away from the young man, Lutz edged his right hand ever so closer to the revolver holstered at his hip. He began eyeing the red Pontiac for dents and scratches, assuming this story of an animal was nothing more than misdirection. Finding none, he turned carefully back to the young man, maintaining a distance of 10 feet. "Okay, Billy, you got about 12 seconds to start making sense before we start to have a problem. Are you saying that the McGuires are dead? Whose blood is on your shoes, son?" "I was trying to tell you, Sheriff. I was driving out on old Highway 99. I saw this big hulking shape cross the road. I don't know what it was, sir, honest, but it spooked me bad enough I damn near skidded out. When I finally got the car stopped on the shoulder, I looked around, but whatever it had disappeared next to that patch of forest next to the McGuire plot. I figured the same as you, sir," Billy continued. "Thought I was just seeing things late at night. Then my headlights. I could see some kind of liquid on the road, like oil. Except I looked again, it wasn't oil. Oh, it was blood." "Possible this animal or whatever you saw could have been wounded?" the sheriff asked. "That's the first thing I thought too, Sheriff. And I hopped out of the car and grabbed my Winchester rifle out of the trunk. Figured I could at least put the poor creature out of its misery. But then I got closer to the blood on the road. When I got closer, Billy started stuttering, and it was as if all the strength in his legs gave out. He sank almost gracefully to his knees, his oil-stained blue jeans sinking into the soft grass of the station's lawn. "Out with it, son. What did you see?" Lutz asked. He was trying to be patient, but it was also imperative that they get to the scene of any crime as fast as possible. Billy took a deep, shaking breath. "An arm, sir, on the side of the road, just beyond my headlight. Oh, it was a lady's arm ripped off at the elbow. It was still wearing a wedding band." At this, Billy started shaking so badly the sheriff thought he might be on the verge of having a seizure. He looked around for a moment, baffled at the turn of events his previously peaceful evening had taken. Then he squatted on his haunches next to the trembling young man. Out of habit, Lutz sniffed the air around Billy Hudson's head, was hoping for the telltale whiff of whiskey or gin, but there was nothing. Lutz turned and walked back into the sheriff's department. "Clarkson!" he bellowed for his senior deputy. A moment later, Henry Clarkson's head popped out of a small office. "Sheriff?" Thank goodness it was Clarkson on duty tonight. Clarkson was a calm and capable officer, excellent in tense situations. He was the only African American on the force. Henry Clarkson had a booming voice and a deep-barreled chest that could get used to great effect on unruly suspects. But he also possessed a logical mind that ticked through every possible scenario before taking any action. Thank God it isn't Miller, Lutz thought again. This time in relief that it wasn't his younger, jumpier deputy sharing the station tonight. "Is the cruiser gassed up?" "Good. Grab the rifle and the shotgun, and get some flashlights as well. We're going out to Highway 99. Something may have happened over at Bud McGuire's place." An additional benefit, Clarkson followed orders without peppering him with dozens of questions. The deputy nodded shortly and turned to do as asked. In the meantime, Lutz went back outside and squatted down next to Billy Hudson, who was still kneeling on the lawn, his head in his hands. Lutz's mouth had a sour taste, and he longed for a cigarette. "It's okay, Billy. You did good, son. It's okay. Just breathe." Andrew Lutz murmured his litany over and over, remembering as he did the way his own father used a similar technique to calm skittish horses. Sure enough, after a minute or two, Billy Hudson's breathing began to slow, and the rigid tension along his spine relaxed. Billy took one or two more slow, rattling breaths and looked up at the sheriff. "Oh, after I found the arm, went to the house," he said with grim resolve. I can't explain it, sir, but something horrible happened in there. I'd like to go home now, please, if that's okay." Sheriff Lutz wanted to tell Billy Hudson that he could go home, have a shower and a stiff drink, but it was not meant to be. "Sorry, Billy. We need you to show us exactly where all of this happened. There aren't any lights out there. We'll drive right past it in the dark." A flicker passed over Billy's face, like he was choking back tears. But his jaw tightened, and he just gave a short, hopeless nod. Lutz called his junior deputy at home, rousing him out of a deep sleep with orders to haul his ass over and man the station, while the two senior men went to check on the McGuires. Then, the three of them piled into the sheriff's cruiser and headed north to Highway 99. That is the end of Chapter 1.
Yeah, you cannot stop at that.
Meh.
Also, everybody, if you would like to check him out, Rygon is over at the Rygon Plays.
Oh. Well, I'm reading the comments. I'm glad you all like it. It's actually been quite a while since I've read a story for on Zim's channel.
It
But,
has, and I've
late
missed
night.
it.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. Alright, let me take a bite of sandwich and we can continue. Read us the whole heckin' book? Well, there's only 5 chapters, and it's a pretty short story, but I'll give it a go. How's your factory going?
It is going very well.
The chapter 1, 2, 3 you sent me? No, I haven't read it yet, Karma. I haven't had much time these days. Alright, we'll go ahead and we'll continue now. Glad you all are enjoying it, though. Alright. As a reminder, this is The Midnight Road by Ashley Schuluter. Chapter 2. The 20 miles from the sheriff's station to the McGuire farm passed in almost complete silence, as the mostly darkened buildings of the small town gave way to the entirely darkened farmland that made up 90% of the area. Endless acres of corn and soybeans framed every small town in the county, with up to 40 miles between communities. Lutz had spent his entire life in Richmond County, and for him, the horizon would always be where the sky met the fields. This limitless expanse of cultivated land was interrupted, rarely, by spotty patches of trees and scrub brush. Most of these forests were barely 20 acres wide, except the Iowa River Nature Preserve, which sprawled over nearly 30 miles of land on the western side of the highway. On the eastern side of the road was Bud McGuire's farm. Those woods had always given Andrew Lutz the creeps. It was an odd, silent place of skeletal pines and briar bushes, offering none of the secret trails and trickling streams of the patches of woods he had enjoyed as a boy. It was also unused by hunters. Even in a region choked with hungry deer, they had no desire to chew on the tough pine bark offered by the trees. Whatever nature the state government was intent on preserving was an open question. The tiniest sliver of waxing moon shone in the sky, not providing enough illumination to make out anything beyond the orange beam of the cruiser's headlights.
Joke.
Each man was lost in his thoughts. Sheriff Lutz had conveyed the broad strokes of the matter to his deputy as they had pulled out of the station. At least one casualty, likely more. Reports of a large animal, possibly a mountain lion. A mountain lion, sir? Officer Clarkson had asked in complete bewilderment when Andrew had told him. Have you looked around, Sheriff? You see any fucking mountains? If we're going out to the Bud McGuire's house, sir, you know as well as I do that we're going out there to find. Yes, Lutz thought as he pulled into the pitted asphalt of Highway 99. I know exactly what we're likely to find. His hands itched for a cigarette, but he pushed the urge aside. He allowed his thoughts to drift to Bud McGuire and tried to ignore the sinking feeling of dread in his stomach. Andrew Lutz had been in his mid-20s when he had first encountered Buddy McGuire. He had been out on patrol one afternoon, driving down the quiet streets of the town when he had seen a young boy in an abandoned lot, squatting in the dust next to a dog. The dog was lying on its side. Concerned that a beloved pet had been struck by a car, Lutz had parked and approached the pair. The dog, a brindle mutt with wide, sad eyes, was convulsing in the dust, panting shallowly as the young boy watched. Buddy could not have been more than 8 or 9 years old at the time, but he showed not a flicker of emotion as he watched the dying animal. "Is this your dog, son?" Lutz had asked kindly. Buddy hadn't answered. Most kids were unfailingly polite to police officers, at least back in those days. But Buddy simply ignored Lutz and continued watching the dog as its breathing became slower. "Do you know what happened to this animal?" Lutz tried again. Still nothing. But then Lutz had noticed a sheet of butcher's paper balled up at the boy's feet. Looking closer, he could see scraps of some kind of ground meat. A picture of what had occurred here was beginning to form in his mind. "Did you give poison bait to this dog, boy?" Raising his voice for the first time. At his shout, the boy finally turned and met Lutz's eyes. The blank, expressionless look on the face of the child caused the officer to take a step back in surprise. There was no fear, no hint of intimidation at being addressed by a stranger, a policeman at that. There was nothing reflecting back in Buddy McGuire's eyes. Shaken, Lutz had reported the incident to then-Sheriff Bradley. Bradley had hooked his thumbs into the sagging waistband of his trousers and pointed out that it had been a stray animal, not a cherished pet. It was a terrible death, to be sure. The local farmers often shot or poisoned strays that wandered onto their properties. The mutts would occasionally kill chickens, ducks, or even began menacing the farmers' children as they played outside. It was a necessary evil, one the boy had probably learned from watching his own father. Lutz had gone back to the abandoned lot later that evening and buried the animal himself. Over the next 10 years, Buddy McGuire made a name for himself as one of those boys who are really good at hurting people. He was in 6th grade. An upperclassman had teased Buddy about his dirty, unkempt hair. In full view of the students and teachers, Buddy had walked over to the older boy, grabbed his wrist, and twisted until bones crunched. Bud McGuire had been expelled in 10th grade and was just in time to be swept up by the Vietnam War 2 years later. No one quite knows what he got up to over there, but when he returned to the town in '75, it was as if a blanket of rage had settled itself on Bud's shoulders. His father had died of cancer while he'd been deployed, and Bud took over his family's 100 or so acres. This small farm was barely have been enough to keep food in their bellies and clothes on their back, but it had been in the family for 3 generations. The soil, that thick, black Midwestern soil, failed Bud McGuire. Corn, beans, wheat. Every crop he planted seemed to wither and die at his touch. His fellow farmers prospered, the rich soil of the land sprouting healthy rows of strong green corn seemingly overnight. Despite all of this, Bud had somehow managed to land himself a wife. Fall of 1977, a mere 15 months after Bud came back from the war, a pale slip of a girl was seen hanging laundry in the front lawn of the McGuire farm. She had long, mousy brown hair and wide blue eyes that were forever fixed on the ground. Who she was, where she came from, was anyone's guess. This would have maddened the women of the community, all of whom were obsessed with lineage, but no information on the girl could be found. She was just there one day, silently feeding chickens or beating rugs. She never came into town, never spoke to anyone. The second time Andrew Lutz encountered Bud McGuire in a professional capacity had been about a year after the arrival of this mysterious woman. The locals had thrown up their hands in exasperation. All of their kind gestures and heartwarming casseroles had been met with a closed door. The McGuires had never been seen attending any of the many churches in the community, nor had the young woman appeared at the supermarket where the wives could pounce on her. The initial confusion had given way to righteous indignation.
Who do they think they were, hauled up all high and mighty on their plot of land? Did the McGuires think they were too good to associate with their peers?
But as the weeks dragged on, and still there was no sight of the young woman in town, winter set in, and she was no longer seen outside by the few people who drove on the old county road. The offended feelings of the townspeople began to shift into concern.
Was she okay? After all, Buddy had always had quite the temper, even before his years in the jungles of Vietnam.
Finally, in the spring of '78, the wives nagged their husbands until the husbands had called the city police. The police, in turn, called the sheriff's department to tell them that someone needed to go check on that girl, to soothe the nerves of their worried neighbors. Lutz had been the junior deputy on duty at the time, and had set off up Highway 99 to the McGuire farm. Barely 3 miles from the floodplains of the Mississippi River, the ground in March was a quagmire of mud that had sucked at Lutz's boot as he stepped out of the police cruiser. The house was a traditional farmhouse, 2 stories with sweeping gables that rose to create a 3rd story in the attic. A large wraparound porch upheld by thick wooden beams led up to the entrance. Lutz had looked around warily before climbing the stairs to the porch. He had knocked twice. No answer. This had been expected, and Lutz turned away from the house and went and sat around the back, where, sure enough, a petite young woman was sorting fresh spring herbs into an array of bowls. She had bristled like a startled cat when she caught sight of him, and Lutz had held his hands in front of him to show he meant no harm. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Deputy Lutz. I'm with the Sheriff's Department. Can I ask your name?" He spoke in a low, gentle voice, taking very slow steps toward the girl. The girl's eyes had been sky blue as he looked into his with an unreadable expression.
April.
The word had been little more than an exhale of breath, and Lutz had been about to ask her to repeat herself when the girl's eyes had focused on something behind his shoulder and whined with alarm. Lutz had turned to see Bud McGuire standing a few paces behind them. His black eyes had been just as blank and soulless as when he had gazed upon that dying dog. Leaning, with casual menace on his shoulder, pointed at the sky, was a double-barreled shotgun, long, sleek muzzle. Lutz had thankfully resisted the urge to startle at the sight of the burly man. "Morning, Bud," he said. With slow, deliberate movements, Lutz had moved his hand to the pistol hoisted at his hip and thumbed open the clasp. Bud had noticed, as he was meant to. His mouth twisted in a scowl. He had replied, "You're not welcome here," he said in a flat, toneless voice. And Lutz had realized this was the first time he was hearing Bud speaking. "I'll be leaving shortly," Lutz had replied in an authoritative tone. "People have been wondering how you two have been getting on up here by yourselves all winter. Thought I'd come over and make sure everything was okay." "Fine. You've seen. Now go." With that, Bud had crossed a short distance between him and his new wife. Lutz had waited for him to hit her. If he did, then the deputy could bring him into the station. But Bud just stood a few feet from the girl with a look of pure fury on his face. April McGuire had been utterly silent during this encounter. Now she sprang from her table of herbs as if scalded. She knelt then, and Lutz saw something he hadn't noticed before. Under the table was a large wicker basket lined with woolen blankets. Nestled sleeping in the blankets was a tiny, swaddled infant. The girl snatched up the basket and fled into the house without another word. Bud had turned. The shotgun still bounced on his shoulder. "This is my property. Ain't no crime been committed. You got no right to be here." All of this was said in the same eerie, deadpan voice. Bud's words, spoken in the same eerie, deadpan voice, were all true. April McGuire had not accused Bud of anything. It wasn't against the law to hold a firearm while standing on your own land, and there was nothing more for Lutz to say. So he retreated back to the cruiser and headed back to the station. He hadn't returned to the McGuire property since that day nearly 8 years ago. The McGuires had been seen no more than a handful of times in those 8 years, most often driving in Bud's battered Dodge Ram as the family returned or drove away along Highway 99. At some point, another child, a daughter, was added to their number. Neither child was ever seen at the local public school or the local Christian school. Many times, Lutz had driven slowly down the county road, hoping to see April McGuire or her children out in the yard. But the house had been shuttered and silent, and Lutz had been forced to keep driving. Over the years, most of the people in the community had long since stopped gossiping about the McGuires. Everyone sympathized with the lonely young woman, isolated with her children and Bud's anger. But these were also a conservative group who prized the right to privacy. As long as there was no apparent problem at the McGuire farm, everyone merely shook their heads and went about their lives, even though they all knew what the ultimate outcome was likely to be. As Sheriff Andrew Lutz neared the McGuire homestead, he was cursing himself for not doing more, for not inventing some ridiculous reason to go check on April and her children. He only hoped he wasn't too late. But it didn't look as though that were the case. Sir?" The voice of Billy Hudson suddenly snapped Andrew Lutz out of his guilt and grief. Consumed by his ghoulish thoughts, he was about to miss the blind curve in the road leading up to Bud's farm. The heavy police cruiser was instead aimed directly at a large pine tree. That is the end of Chapter 2.
Oh! Please keep going.
Stardust is edging your seat. Yeah, just give me a second to drink. All right. Chapter 3. Lutz twisted the steering wheel violently, and the ponderous car screeched his resistance to such treatment, fishtailing wildly across the road in long snaking arcs before he was able to get control. Heart hammering from the near miss, the sheriff pointed the car at the shallow gravel shoulder and pulled over. His hands were clutching the steering wheel in a white-knuckle grip. It took a moment of effort to release them. He killed the engine, and for a long moment the only sound was the quiet ticking of the engine as it cooled. Ahead of this curve, the trees would open on side at the beginning of the McGuire farm. "Sorry about that, guys," he finally managed to say. Officer Clarkson was looking at him with pure astonishment, as if he had just seen a mountain lion in the farmlands of Iowa. In the rearview mirror, Billy met his gaze with a dark look as the two officers unclipped their seatbelts and stepped out into the humid summer night. Immediately, something felt off, and the flesh on Lutz's arms crawled. He motioned for Clarkson to join him, and released Billy from his cage in the back seat. Crossing to the trunk, Lutz pulled out the rifle and handed it to Deputy Clarkson. He grabbed the shotgun and two high-beam flashlights before closing the trunk. With a nod of understanding, he passed the shotgun and one of the flashlights to Billy Hudson. All of the boys and most of the girls in this region learned to shoot before they were 10 years old. Knowledge of firearms and firearm safety was deeply ingrained in a community where almost everyone's deep freezers were stocked full of fresh venison every autumn. Lutz felt no hesitation about handing the shotgun over to the young man. The kid had sense, even if he was overly fond of drag racing. His driver's side door was still open. Lutz reached in to turn off the headlights, and then thought twice. The dim light was all they had beside the heavy maglite he now carried opposite his service pistol. He left the cruiser's light running, closed the doors of the car with a heavy thud, and the three of them turned to survey their surroundings. That odd feeling was still creeping up the back of Lutz's neck. But it was Billy who was able to give voice to his unease.
"Oh, all the bugs are quiet,"
The young man whispered. Lutz listened carefully, and realized he was right. This was high summer. The air was thick and humid, and it should have been filled with the chirps of insects, the nightly concerto of katydids, cicadas, and crickets was usually enough to drive a man half mad. But here, there wasn't so much as the buzz of a mosquito. The only sound was the quiet tapping of the men's boots as they began walking north toward Buds McGuire's home. The light from the headlights didn't fail to penetrate the gloom ahead, and Lutz clicked on the high-powered maglite. Next to him, Billy shouldered the shotgun, his smaller flashlight pressed with one hand under the barrel. Deputy Clarkson was at the ready with a long Winchester rifle at his shoulder. Normally used when a deputy needed to put down a wounded animal on the side of the road, Lutz was immensely grateful just now for its solid, reliable presence. Lutz swept the flashlight in slow, careful strokes from one edge of the road to another. "Where did you say you saw this arm now, son?" he asked Billy. A little farther ahead, I think. Billy's voice came from his right. Maybe another 300 feet or so? Lutz continued methodically, sweeping his flashlight from side to side. At the edge of the beam, he could make out the burned rubber made by tires suddenly skidding across the road. The tracks continued up the road, fading away into the darkness. The men were now far enough away from the relative safety of the car that its dim headlights could no longer assist in penetrating the gloom ahead. The beams from the two flashlights seemed to grow smaller and fainter as they walked in loose formation up the road. Abruptly, the burned rubber skids made by Billy's tires came to an end about 6 feet in front of them. 3 men all stopped together, staring dumbfoundedly ahead. In the beam of Billy's flashlight, the edge of the road as it faded into scrub grass, was the arm of a human female. It had been torn crudely at the elbow, and bloody strings of meat hung from one end. The other end was wearing a thin gold wedding band around the ring finger. The nails were chipped, bedded with dirt. All the blood in his body seemed rushed to his head, and Lutz could feel his heartbeat pounding sickeningly in his temples. Deputy Clarkson gave a violent heave and turned to vomit quietly into the ditch on the other side of the highway. Lutz squatted down on his haunches near the severed arm and reached for the ballpoint pen he kept in his shirt pocket. Turning his head to take one more breath of unfouled air, he used the pen to lift one of the strips of flesh away from the wound. It had been almost shredded, and for one horrifying instant the image of Lutz's late wife venison jerky came to his mind. Sour bile rose in his throat, and he fought against the urge to puke. What animal could do this to a person? What animal would bother? To his knowledge, there had never been a report of bears in this area, and any wolves had been killed off generations ago. Coyotes would take a chicken or a duck once in a while, but Lutz couldn't recall a single instance of them going after a small child, let alone a grown woman. Besides, these weren't the teeth or claw marks of a coyote. Whatever had done this had had much longer teeth. A sudden snap from the forest on his left. Lutz's blood turned to ice in his veins. Clarkson heard it too. His rifle was back at his shoulder in an instant, and he took a hesitant step towards the looming blackness. Next to him, Billy Hudson was utterly rigid, his fingers deathly white around the grip of the shotgun. Another snap in the darkness. Had that one been closer? He quickly swung the beam of the flashlight away from the grisly scene on the road, in the direction of the woods. It illuminated skeletal pine trees and waist-high thorn bushes. The light shone eerily on the narrow trunks of the pines. With their ladders of broken branches, the trees became rows of menacing spears waiting to impale unwary travelers. The unnatural silence of the woods was oppressive. Lutz peered into the darkness, willing the shadows to separate into shapes. He focused on the edges of the light, where it faded into a thick and impenetrable blackness. He thought he could see shapes in the dark, looming patches of shadow that were somehow blacker than the night. Hulking figure dancing just out of his field of vision. But nothing came charging at them from out of the woods. And after a long moment, Lutz relaxed his posture, telling himself unconvincingly that it had been a deer. Lutz turned back to Billy. They now had evidence of a death, but not necessarily evidence of a crime. There was still work to be done before they could all go back home. "Did you say there were more bodies?" he asked. Billy hesitated for a long moment, and then replied, Yes, maybe. I don't know. Just come see for yourselves." Clarkson looked bewildered by the answer, but rolled his eyes and shrugged. "Let's get this done, Sheriff. This place gives me the fucking creeps." Hearing his deputy admit his apprehension somehow served to boost Lutz's own confidence. The forest was now at his back, and he felt watchful eyes on them, but he shook off his nerves. Nodding affirmation at Billy, he confirmed, "Let's get this the fuck over with and go home." Leaving the lone, pitiful arm on the side of the highway, the men now began skirting the edge of the cornfield that bordered Bud McGuire's home. The corn, which should have towered over them at a full height of 16 feet, was sickly looking and screwed. This actually offered Lutz some comfort. The weakened stalks of the malnourished crops made it easier for the beam of his maglite to pierce the fields. Looming ahead, set back nearly a quarter-mile from the edge of the highway, was the McGuire house. At first, it looked much the same as when Lutz had paid his visit 8 years previously, but the disrepair of the home became increasingly apparent as they turned onto the loose gravel driveway. At the start of the path was a rust-eaten mailbox, leaning precariously on its weathered wooden post. The McGuires had obviously failed to keep up with their correspondence. He wondered idly how Bud took care of things like electricity and plumbing. The bills never came to their house. The main house must have been truly lovely in some bygone age. Its frame was a clean and crisp colonial, with gabled windows and a large wraparound porch. But the clean lines were obscured by a sagging roof and missing shutters. The porch was also drooping, with a dilapidated wicker couch sitting neglected to one corner. What must once have been cheerful white paint and blue trimming was now gray and peeling in great strips from the wood. The whole house had an air of exhaustion, like a once proud old horse that no longer had the energy to hold its head up in the traces. The front door was hanging open by one twisted hinge. As the men approached, Lutz held up one hand curled into a fist as a signal to hold position. His earlier jitters had cleared away, replaced by the curiously detached feeling he always felt when he was approaching a crime scene that was sure to be unpleasant. Normally, it was a high school kid who partied too hard and wrapped his car around a tree, or a trucker who came home drunk and decided to put his wife in the morgue. After 30 years in the sheriff's department, Lutz was no stranger to the violence inherent in men. It wasn't a man that tore off that child's arm, though. As if to confirm this chilling thought, Lutz shone his flashlight on the broken door of the house. Scratched deep into the wood, deep enough that the door was nearly splintered into pieces, were 4 parallel gouges running from the top of the door frame to the bottom corner in one long, unbroken arc. The aluminum doorknob was twisted out of shape and hung uselessly to one side. Beyond the door, only more blackness. That is the end of chapter 3.
Oh. I think you might have a right if you even think about being done.
Well, it looks like it wants me to read. If it wants me to do more chapters, I gotta like make an account now. So you guys gotta give me a second.
Tune in next time. Thanks for joining, everybody.
All right, I just used a quick Google sign in. All right, let me go ahead and take a drink, and we'll start chapter 4.
I suppose we can keep going.
Yeah, why not? Right, here we go. Chapter 4. Deputy Clarkson had been a wonderfully good sport up until this point. But when presented with the prospect of crossing the threshold of this house, he balked. He released his death grip on his rifle, lowering it to his side and exclaiming, "No offense, Sheriff, but fuck this. I'm not going in there. Let's go back to the car and call." "Call who, Henry?" Lutz said flatly. "The state troopers can't do anything except write tickets to out-of-towners. The town police call us when there is a violent death. So who exactly should we call? Animal control?" Clarkson glowered back at him. "Then let's go back to the car and come back in the goddamn daylight," he hissed between clenched teeth. Personally, Lutz felt that Clarkson was speaking the most sense that anyone had all night. But as much as he privately agreed with his deputy's plan to retreat far away from the Guire house, they were there, and there was a job to do. "Come on now, Henry. Billy's been inside. Can't let the kid show us up now, huh? Can we?" Lutz said with a forced lightheartedness that rang false in his ears. He sighed, ran one hand along his forehead and through his salt and pepper hair, and tried again. "Yeah, this sucks. Doesn't change facts. We have to find out what, if anything, occurred here tonight. So let's just sack up and get it done, yeah?" It wasn't much of a pep talk, but it seemed to do the trick. Billy gave a heavy shrug, scuffing his boots against the brown grass bordering the McGuire's front porch. Clarkson closed his eyes for a moment, as if offering up a silent prayer, then re-shouldered his firearm and nodded at Lutz. "I'm taking a long weekend," he stated matter-of-factly. "Gonna take my wife up to Iowa City. Gotta go to Red Lobster. It's Crab Fest." He continued muttering to himself about his upcoming weekend, but brushed past Lutz and climbed the creaking steps into the porch. "You can have the whole week off," Lutz mentally promised his deputy. Then he pulled his revolver out of its holster, thumbed the safety off, and followed the two men past the entrance and into Bud McGuire's home. A profound silence settled around the men as they crossed the threshold of the McGuire house. The footsteps made by the officer's heavy boots were muffled by the layer of dust that lay upon the floor. In the beam of the flashlight, the wallpaper in the foyer may have been a sunny striped yellow at some point, but had been warped with water damage and was now the color of old urine. Ahead of the men was a long corridor with a doorway on either side. On one side, Lutz could see the ubiquitous farmhouse mudroom, complete with rows of rubber Wellington boots and heavy winter parkas. The wellies were dull and cracked with disuse, and the coats were moth-eaten and smelled of damp. A closed door led deeper into the house, probably into the kitchen. On the left side of the corridor was a room Lutz's wife would have referred to as a parlor when she was alive, with delicate furniture and assorted porcelain figurines. Here was the first evidence of human activity. The dainty tables were smashed to bits, and the rose-patterned love seat was at a fine angle to a moth-eaten rug, as if someone had forcibly shifted the couch by standing with sudden force. A broken water jug lay in pieces on the floor. Oddly enough, even this violent scene was gentled by a thick layer of dust. So far, the only sign that a living person had been in the house were the tracks he could see in the corridor that had clearly been made by Billy's heavy work boots. Where were Maguires? Lutz moved on a constant pivot, shining his high-powered flashlight into every corner and crevice. His senses felt electrified as he strained each one of his senses to determine whether or not a threat still lurked in this house. According to his eyes and ears, this was just a normal house, though terribly neglected. "Billy," he whispered under his breath. "Why the fuck did you even come in here?" Billy responded equally quietly. "Like I said, sir, I thought maybe someone was in trouble. When I got here, it was like I just had to keep going. I had to see for myself." Lutz understood. He could feel it too. The panicky urge to head back for the car was drowned out by grim determination. Needed to find out what the hell had happened here. Past the open doorways to the mudroom and the parlor was a flight of stairs that went from the first floor all the way to the attic in a long switchback. The stairs, like everything else in the Maguire house, seemed to be standing upright by sheer force of will alone. Running along the right edge of the staircase, in a long unbroken line from top to bottom, was a wide swath of dried blood. The first thought that ran through Sheriff Lutz's mind in that moment was that he wished he lived in a larger city with more resources. If they were farther north, near Des Moines or Cedar Rapids, the three men standing in the Maguire house could have been surrounded by backup within an hour. A small fleet of detectives, forensic experts, photographers, evidence baggers, and rubberneckers could gather at the homestead. The living darkness of the August summer night would be beaten back by high-powered flash bulbs and battery-powered spotlights. Under their harsh glare, and soothed by the shop talk of the gathered officials, whatever horrors had visited the Maguire family would be revealed as just another crime scene. Still tragic, but acceptable to the mind. A sane sequence of events. Unfortunately, this little pocket of eastern Iowa was small and underpopulated. The mechanics needed to properly investigate a potential crime were simply not in place. As much as Lutz dreaded the idea, it would have to be him that ventured up those stairs, and it would have to be now. He would have to venture up there, and so would Clarkson, as department regulations forbade an officer from entering a potential crime scene alone. Plus, he wanted Clarkson's steady presence beside him with the Winchester. But that didn't mean they all had to go. "Billy," Lutz said to the young man without turning, "if you don't want to go up there a second time, now's your chance. Go wait for us on the porch. Stand guard."
With all due respect, sir, there's no way I'm staying down here by myself.
Billy squared his shoulders and gave Lutz a defiant look. "Your choice, kid." Lutz gave him a nod and turned back to the problem of the staircase. They would have to make sure they didn't contaminate the crime scene with their boots. The blood was thick all the down the stairs, where it abruptly stopped at the second to last riser. Here, a slightly thicker pool of blood still shone with faint wetness under his flashlight. Whatever had happened here had happened recently. "Slow and steady does it now. Don't step in it." Squeezing his lanky frame to the far edge of the staircase, Lutz placed a heavy boot on the first riser. A puff up of dust arose, and the stair gave a wheezing groan, but it did not buckle under his weight. Lutz began slowly advancing his way up the stairs, pressing firmly on each stair first to test its stability. The staircase creaked and moaned, but continued to hold firm, and he motioned for Clarkson to follow. Lutz could hear his usually taciturn deputy muttering various prayers and swear words under his breath. The swath of blood continued up the stairs in an unbroken shriek. Now it veered off to the right and disappeared into the darkness of a long corridor. The overwhelming odor was of dirt and mold, but the coppery smell of fresh blood was also thick in the air. A few framed photos hung at uneven intervals, their subjects almost completely obscured with dust. The dust on the floor was disturbed now, but there were no distinct tracks. It had been swept almost clean away in some places. Resigned now to seeing this through, Lutz felt his earlier fear retreat to the back of his mind. The adrenaline pumping through his system was working for him now, sharpening his focus and steadying his pulse. The corridor opened twice to the right, and Lutz circled warily around the open entrance to the first room. A cursory glance revealed a dingy bathroom. Perhaps it had once been a bathroom. Now it was a heap of stained and cracked porcelain, rusted out pipe hanging loosely where a sink may have been. Torn linoleum covered parts of the floor, but most of it was the same weathered floorboards as the rest of the upstairs. The air was heavy with the smells of stale grime and mildew. The bath of blood, which had become thicker as he advanced along the corridor, continued down the hallway to the second room. Lutz signaled to Billy to cover the entrance of the bathroom. Then he and Clarkson advanced, firearms cocked and ready. Lutz still carried the maglite, held to the top of his service pistol, so he was the first to cautiously peer around the corner of the room at the end of the hall. When Lutz first shone his flashlight into the darkened room, he actually breathed a sigh of relief. He had expected to find the strewn and dismembered bodies of April McGuire and her children in pieces about the floor. Instead, the room appeared entirely empty on first glance. There were no severed limbs clad in footy pajamas. There was also no furniture, curtains, rugs, or anything else to indicate that the space had ever been occupied by inhabitants other than mice. The bare wooden floor was littered with their droppings, but much else. He began sweeping his flashlight from floor to ceiling. The walls had been painted a deep scarlet that looked almost wet by the light of the... Oh. For a span of time that felt like an eternity, but was in reality probably more like 30 seconds, Lutz stood stock still in the entrance to that room. His head cocked to one side like a man trying to figure out a really good riddle. One eyebrow was raised, and his mouth hung open in bewilderment. The room had been drenched in great splashes of blood that reached all the way to the ceiling in some places. It was swirled in sporadic circles across the floor and spattered against all four walls. The closest thing Lutz could compare it to. Behind him, Lutz could hear Clarkson's sharp intake of breath as he also took in the scene before them. Then, it was as if all the air went out of his lungs, and Sheriff Lutz suddenly deflated. He felt his knees give way, and had to lean one hand against the outside wall of the hallway for support, as his vision blurred, and his head spun. He still had the flashlight in one hand, and it was pointed into the room, shining onto the dripping walls. He felt more than saw Clarkson stumble backwards into the wall behind him. Billy stood at the doorway to the demolished bathroom, studying the mud on his boots. Lutz realized that the younger man had already seen all of this. "Billy, did you see any bodies when you were here earlier?" Billy met the sheriff's eyes directly. "When I saw the blood on the stairs, I figured maybe someone was still alive up here. But when I got up here, there was nothing. The batteries in my flashlight were starting to die, and then I saw that room." He gestured towards the room with the bloody walls. "I got the hell out of here quick as I could. I didn't check any of the other rooms." "So where the fuck are the bodies?" It looked like Bud McGuire and his family in a salad spinner. There's blood. It looked like Bud McGuire and his family in a salad spinner. "There's blood on the goddamn ceiling," Clarkson queried, stepping closer to the open door of the empty room and glancing inside once more. "Yeah, that's the problem. It's blood. Just blood. No bones. No organs." Lutz's mind was still spinning as it frantically tried to bring a sense of logic into what it had just witnessed. There should be pieces of the McGuires everywhere. But so far the only evidence of an actual crime is that arm out on the road. He turned to face the other two men, continuing to speak under his breath. Clarkson faced him, his normally placid face a mask of tension and fear. "Yeah, how did that arm even get out there? Why does it look like no one has lived here in 5 years? Where the hell are the McGuires?" The last sentence he said in a whispered shout. "Are they in the barn? The basement?" "Are they in the barn? The basement? Did Bud chop them up and carry them into the woods? Is it even Bud? What the hell were those claw marks on the door, Sheriff?" Clarkson continued raising his questioning in a voice that did not conceal his rising terror. Lutz gripped his deputy tightly by the shoulders, his own fear gone in the face of his officer's increasingly panic. "Of course it was Bud. Henry. We'll find him. Don't worry." This idea, as nightmarish as it was, offered a kind of morbid comfort. Bud McGuire might be a deranged madman who had just killed his entire family. But he was a man. A man bled when you shot him. This whole time, Billy Hudson had been silent, his eyes fixed on the open doorway to the dingy bathroom. Now, Billy cleared his throat and almost sheepishly said, "Sheriff, you might want to see this." Had there ever been less welcome words in human history? Lutz pinched his nose between two fingers and reluctantly asked, "What is it?" Billy just gestured with the head of the shotgun, and in the bright glow from his maglite, Lutz could see a thin line of blood slowly making its way from behind the open bathroom door. Immediately, his heart, which had just begun to resume its regularly scheduled beat, started jackhammering wildly in his chest. Somehow, in that moment, Lutz knew. Whatever they had come here to find was on the other side of that door. On their first walk through of the corridor, three men had been preoccupied by the path of blood that led to the room at the end of the hall. Now, upon closer inspection, Lutz realized that there was the faintest glimmer of light coming from the darkened bathroom. His mouth was dry as bone, and Lutz swallowed hard, and then, pistol still at the ready, he eased around the doorway of the bathroom and put his back against the nearest wall. He checked the corner, and finding it empty, proceeded to circle around the room. Clarkson covered him from behind, while Billy stood guard once more outside the room. The light was coming from two flickering candles, the tall glass ones of the sort his grandmother used to burn on Sundays. The flames were sputtering their last breaths, and two more candles had already drowned in their own racks. How long do those candles burn? Lutz made a mental note to check, and kept his eyes on a swivel, trying to observe as much as possible about the scene. The candles had been arranged next to a chipped green bathtub that formed a small circle, in the middle of which was a blackened circle, as someone had foolishly decided to build a fire in the middle of the floor. On the edge of the bathtub was draped a faded calico dress. Lutz approached the garment, which had been carefully arranged so not to wrinkle against the sides of the tub. The tub itself was empty. Lutz suddenly froze as he heard Clarkson swore a low oath behind him. Filled with sudden dread, he pivoted instinctively on his heel and prepared to fire. For the first time that night, Andrew Lutz screamed at the top of his lungs. Slumped in one corner of the trashed bathroom, in a slowly spreading pool of blood, was what remained of Bud McGuire. That is the end of Chapter 4.
I had the feeling that kind of a, twist was gonna be coming, but, jeez. Also, hi, Ido. Hi, Rahari. You guys came into horror time.
We've got just one more chapter, everybody.
A gleaming endowment.
Raharu95 tipped $25. Very nice narration, whatever it was.
Well, thank you so much for that tip, Rahar, though. If you're wanting to thank for the narration, you should really go check out Rygon, because he's the one actually doing it. But I really appreciate the support.
All right, we ready for the last one?
I am.
Okay. Let's see what's at the end of the story. Chapter 5. Lutz couldn't tear his eyes away from the gruesome sight. Bud McGuire's face was frozen in a silent shriek. Wide eyes fixed unblinkingly at the ceiling. His chest had been torn open crudely. The glinting white of ribs poked through the carnage. Bud's legs were bent at an impossible angle to his torso. He had been torn almost in two at the groin. The first scream that passed Sheriff Lutz's lips was quickly followed by a second. He fell backwards to the ground and landed hard on his rear, using the heels of his feet to push himself away from the mutilated corpse. His back pressed against the rusted green bathtub, and he idly noticed that the calico dress laying across the edge had a faint pattern of purple violets. Then Clark's strong brown hands were wrapped around his own, and his deputy hauled Lutz to his feet. They exited the broken bathroom and its grisly contents and went into the corridor, where Billy Hudson was already halfway down the stairs leading to the first floor. The ancient staircase creaked threateningly beneath their boots as the two officers followed the younger man downstairs, desperate to get as far away from Bud McGuire's mutilated corpse as possible. Lutz burst out the still open front door and stumbled down the porch steps. The humid summer air was like a soothing balm against his skin. His lungs heaved with the effort to draw in fresh breath, and he sank to his knees, digging his fists into the hard gravel of the walkway. He could hear the footsteps of Deputy Clarkson and Billy sounding down the stairs and out onto the front lawn. They remained mercifully silent as Lutz fought against the waves of heat and chills that kept alternating their way through his veins. Distantly, as if observing someone else from far above, Lutz understood that he was having a panic attack. With shaking arms, he shifted his weight until he was sitting on the lawn bordering the front path. Dry grass crackled as he brought his knees up to his forehead and sat there, breathing in the night air. Somewhere, nearby, a cricket chirped, breaking the stillness. Crickets were still chirping. Somehow, this was an encouraging thought. Lutz raised his head and looked for a moment at the night sky. The sun was still hours away from rising, and the sky was pitch black, except for the thousands of glittering stars. Lutz took a deep breath and held it for a long moment before slowly exhaling. He repeated his steady breathing twice more, then warily got to his feet, wincing as his knees cracked in protest. He brushed dry grass off the pants of his uniform and looked at his companions, both of whom had remained silently nearby this entire time. Nodding once in silent gratitude, Lutz resumed his authority as sheriff. None of them would speak a word of his temporary breakdown, but they could all feel a sudden shift in the atmosphere, as if a sudden bond of kinship had just been forged. Lutz knew that the three of them would forever be bound by the events of this night. Officer Clarkson looked to a senior officer. Do you want to check out the rest of the property? Look for the rest of the family? Lutz began shaking his head almost immediately. No. We found what we were looking for. This is officially a crime scene. It's also a 40-acre farm with 2 barns and at least 10 outbuildings. We need more men. You want to call in Miller and Sanchez? Clarkson asked. Lutz nodded, but then shook his head. Yeah, we'll call them in when we get back to the station. No radio signal out here worth a damn anyway. Besides, I think we also need to get on the phone with the mayor's office. We're going to need the forensics people in Iowa City or Davenport or wherever the hell. At this, Sheriff Lutz turned and began walking back the way they had come. He glanced back once more at the darkened windows of the McGuire farmhouse, which now seemed like looming eyes in the receding light from their flashlights. His boots crunched under the rough gravel of the long driveway as the 3 men headed back towards the car. The yellow, sickly-looking corn blocked their view on either side, looming far taller than a man even in this unhealthy state. Lutz was struck again by the eerie silence of the place. The humid summer air was heavy and still. Not a breath of wind rustled through the stalks. The near-complete absence of sound made him uneasy and uncomfortable. The sooner they were back to the car, the better. Billy must have felt the same way. He trotted up alongside Lutz, his rifle loosely grasped in one hand now that they were out of the farmhouse. In a low voice, he said, What will happen now, Sheriff? Lutz shrugged. First, we're going back to the station. I have a bottle of Lagavulin 16 in a locked box in my office. Sheriff Bradley gave me that bottle the day I took office. Now, he told me this whiskey was peaty enough and smoky enough to burn away the worst night of your life. Told me there would someday come the night when I would need it. It sat in its wooden box every night, until I really started to think that day would never come. But come it did. And tonight I'm going to open that bottle and drink deep, and you'll drink with me if you like. Heartened by this prospect, the men picked up the pace, and within a few minutes they emerged from the McGuire's driveway back into the smooth paved surface of Highway 99. Like an angel in the darkness, Lutz could see the police cruiser sitting on the edge of the road about 300 yards down. He breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that some secret part of him had expected the black and white Chevy to be gone, leaving them stranded at the McGuire farm. Lutz's palms were sweating, and he wiped them furtively against the thighs of his trousers. He checked his watch, then checked it again in disbelief. They had barely been gone 40 minutes. When they reached the car, Lutz fumbled in his pocket for his keys, then unlocked the door and slid onto the driver's seat. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, and he wondered briefly if he was fit to drive. Can't exactly ask Clarkson or Billy to chauffeur me home, he thought resignedly. Lutz unlocked the passenger and back doors, and his companions slid silently onto their seats. Clarkson was still holding the buck rifle, and the shotgun was in Billy's lap, the mounted flashlight still beaming a bright circle on the car's upholstery. As one, the men fastened their seatbelts. The familiar, everyday click of the metal sliding into place struck him as utterly absurd after the night's events. Lutz slid the key into the Chevy, into the ignition. He had a horrible crawling feeling in the bottom of his stomach when he turned the key. The engine would simply refuse to start. This was ridiculous, since the cruiser was barely 3 years old and he had never done anything but purr like a kitten. But tonight, right now, the car wouldn't start, because it couldn't be this easy to just drive away. The key turned, and the motor roared to life, just as it always did. The front headlights came on, casting 2 wide beams of light into the darkness around them. Reflecting back, impossibly high against the skeletal pines of the forest, were a pair of glowing red eyes. Clarkson screamed first, throwing his hands over his face and crying out in terror. Lutz couldn't scream. His voice seemed to have completely locked itself his way. His mouth gaped open in horror, but the only sound that came out was a strangled choke. Billy was scrambling to get out of the police cruiser, but since he was in the back, the doors only opened from the outside. He tried rolling down the windows, and when that failed, he began to panic and bashed at the glass with his fist again and again. But this was equally ineffective. Billy raised the butt of his shotgun and drew back, preparing to ram it through the window of the car. "No!" Lutz roared, never taking his eyes from the glowing red orbs watching them from the forest. He jammed the clutch in, praying to anyone who might be listening that the car did not stall. He shifted into first, gave the engine some gas, and the car began slowly moving. This entire time he continued staring at the red eyes hovering 20 feet above them. They looked back unwaveringly, glittering with a malevolent intelligence. As the cruiser rolled past, the eyes followed their progress but did not advance. Lutz fixed his gaze on the rear view mirror, waiting for some ravenous beast to come charging behind them. But there was nothing. The darkness of the night took over, and the eyes receded into the trees. Intent now on putting as much distance between himself and the McGuire farm as possible, Lutz laid one heavy boot on the gas. After only 10 miles, when he could see the lights of Harry Gibson's fuel station, did he ease his boot off the accelerator and relax the hunched position of his shoulders. 10 minutes later, they pulled up to the darkened windows of the sheriff's station. Lutz killed the engine of the cruiser, and the 3 men sat in silence. After a long moment, Henry Clarkson opened his mouth.
What was that thing?
He began, but Lutz put up a hand and stopped him. Lutz shook his head, opened the door of the cruiser with a loud creak, and stepped outside. Every muscle in his body was accusing him of gross misconduct, and Lutz knew he would feel the punishment the next day. He unlocked the door to the sheriff's office and went in. The comfortable surroundings of the dingy sheriff's station almost brought him to tears. Weakly buzzing security fluorescents cast a dim, yellowish glow on the familiar disarray of desks and chairs. Without bothering to turn on the main lights, he crossed the bullpen to the corner office at the back of the station and went inside his office. On the bookcase, across the far wall, was a narrow wooden box, which Lutz now opened for the first time in 10 years. Nestled against dark silk was the bottle of Lagavulin 16, given to him by retiring Sheriff Bradley on his last day in office. There will come a day when you need it. Lutz motioned to Clarkson and Billy, who had followed him into the station and now stood silently behind him, framing the door to his office. Clarkson had fetched 3 glasses from the small kitchen, and he set them down carefully on the stained wood of Lutz's desk. Andrew Lutz sat heavily in his black office chair. He twisted the cap off the bottle of scotch and poured 3 fingers into each glass. The amber liquid glinted dully in the dim light. The powerful peaty smell of the alcohol bit into his nose, and he raised his glass, and the 2 men in front of him raised theirs. "Drink up," advised. And the one smooth motion, all 3 of them drained their glasses. The scotch blazed a fiery trail to his stomach, to burn the nightmares away. He reached to refill his glass. The end.
Please tell me there's a part 2. A sequel, something.
I
Don't
can
have to
check
do it
see what the
tonight,
author has.
but that was... Oh! Fuck. Wonderfully well done.
Oh, thank you much. Yes, and it was a good story, considering it was just one I kind of pulled off the shelf on a site with, a bunch of random stories. The quality is always going to be different, but this one was a good one.
That one was very well written, though.
Oh,
Very
yes,
well
definitely.
written. And of course, the narration only served to help it.
Yeah, if I actually manage to reach my own goal, I'll be reading a whole horror book, so I'll have to let you know if that gets done, since I know you'd probably enjoy it.
Yes, that is putting it lightly.
Stardust Orchard is like, everyone's freaking out, and he's like, nope, getting drunk.
And you blame the guy?
You want to know what I expected it to be?
What?
I expected this to be a Revenge of the Dead Dog.
I mean, it still could be. We don't actually know what caused that. We only know there were glowing red eyes. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
For all we know, it is the
4
dog.
big claws. Oh, jeez, big old chills. Stardust, like, I thought it was going to be the wife.
I was definitely expecting it not to be the, Bud. Like, it's a little too cliche for it to have been him. Or, you know, the whole... Oh yeah, this is clearly an awful guy, and he's not the one that did it.
Another potential was that it was actually... Because you remember Billy said he was taking his, like, girl out? He never really mentioned what he did with her.
True.
I mean, yeah, she just kind of disappeared, so... Yeah, still a good story. That was good to read, and thankfully it wasn't super hard in terms of the voices. I know I could have given Mr. Clarkson a deeper voice, but it's just like, oh well, Lutz already got the deep voice. He'll just have to go with generic voice.
You did an incredible job regardless.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed, man. Yeah, like I said, it's been a while since I did a reading, so that was good practice. There's a pit.
Yeah, it's apparently a core seam. I can apparently mine stuff from the deeper into the planet with this. However, I think this is where I'm going to be calling it for this evening. With that incredible storytelling.
Yep. And just to give the author one more shout out before you finish off, that was
yes.
The Midnight Road by Ashley Schuluter. If I'm saying that right. You can find it on INKIT.com. Give it a check out, and maybe check out their other 2 stories. I saw that they wrote 2 others.
Are any of them a sequel?
They were not. They looked like they were completely separate.
Damn. Because now I just got that mystery of what was it? Who was it? Because I'm sure I speak for a lot of people here that, you know, probably werewolf. Or some form of thereof, you know.
Who knows? Maybe there's a reason that nature preserve is out there. I'm just saying.
Maybe. But there's still, you know, the wife unaccounted for, except for her arm. So I don't think it was the wife. Obviously, Bud himself is gone. But what about the kids, you know?
I don't know. Where did all that blood come from, too? Like, that was a lot of blood to paint a room.
True.
Who knows?
Then again, that might be the real horror of this. The mystery left unsolved.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a way, I mean, that's horror for you. Sometimes the imagination is a far greater storyteller than anything anyone can come up with.
It actually really is. Like, for me, I don't actually, I don't get scared of things once I see them.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fear of the unknown that gets me.
Yep. As it
So-
does for many people.
Like, for me, I can do Phasmo no problems and a lot of those other horror games, because been there, done that. Nothing new. It's not scary anymore. Spiders will always give me the heebie-jeebies, but I'm not really scared of them. I used to be. I do get scared when, again, that fear of the unknown, when they get away and I don't know where they are. But that's easy to fix by finding them and smushing them.
Indeed.
And it's why for the spider tonight, because there have been 2 spiders that have gone across the wall and I ignored them. I'm like, okay, they're over there, they're minding their own business. Don't like it, but they're not bothering me. And then both times they went on to my desk. That's my territory? No. Bad. And, yeah. This time it's like, nope, not even gonna risk it. They all go for my desk. Nope. But anyways, thank you everybody for joining us today for Factorio, as well as that incredible narration by Rygon over at the channel Rygon Plays. Check out our website, zgfgaming.com. We've got links for our Discord, Telegram, Mastodon, Blue Sky, Patreon, and more. There on the website, as well as down in the description below through our link tree. Thank you to my patrons, tippers, and subscribers. It is your support that keeps this channel alive and going. I cannot do this without your guys' help and your support, so thank you. Consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com/zgfgaming. We've got some art rewards coming in the very near future over there, as well as, it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Though you can also do so by subscribing to our YouTube, grabbing some packs of cards to Stream Loots, subscribing through Stream Loots, or just tipping to the channel directly. But for now, thank you all so much for joining, and I bid you the most fondest adieu.
But why?